Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm really pleased to have in the studio one of the best writers out there. Igor Volsky is the Vice President at the Center for American Progress, Deputy Director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and you're doing great work.
Well, thank you, Tom. It's good to
you've
be
been on
here.
the show before. This is the first time we've been in person.
First time here in studio, and we're just a couple of blocks down. We're neighbors, we discovered.
Yeah, right here in the K Street corridor, it's near all
between the lobbyists.
Between the lobbyists and the White House. That's
right.
We are holding the fort.
Tom. Yeah.
Anyhow, you've got this incredibly cool new tool that all of you right now need to get on your computer and check this thing out. Trumpcare Toolkit.org is the website. Tell us what this is.
So there's about 14 Senate Republicans who are going to decide the fate of this bill. These are either senators who live in states where they've expanded Medicaid, and so taking Medicaid away like this Senate bill does is going to cause a lot of harm to their constituents, or these are senators who are kind of on the fence for one reason or the other. And so what we decided to do, let's just take those 14 senators, put them on the webpage, put all of their phone numbers next to their pictures, and put a tweet option as well with how many people would lose coverage in their states if the Senate bill becomes law. So when people go to the site, TrumpcareToolkit.org, they could easily call with one click, or they can tweet at the senator with one click, reminding them if they vote for this thing, hundreds of thousands of people would lose insurance.
And with specific numbers customized to their states.
This is based on the Congressional Budget Office analysis.
That's great.
Of the House bill and, of course, the Senate bill we're expecting to be
actually
similar.
Worse.
Impossibly worse, I mean, they did some tricks, as you know. They took the Medicaid out of the CBO window, and so we'll see how that works out. But certainly millions would go uninsured, and sick people will have a very hard time finding coverage.
Took the Medicaid out of the CBO window. Tell me about that.
Well, so because they phase it out over a longer period of time, the Congressional Budget Office only looks at 10 years. And so anything that happens outside of that 10 years, they don't include in their official score. They might talk about it in the text, but it's one of the ways you can kind of game the number and try to get a more favorable number. I thought this was a 7-year phase out. It's more than 10 years? Well, the phase out doesn't start. So the phase out on the Senate bill takes longer than the House bill. So in the House bill, you were able to capture the phase. The CBO was able to capture the phase out. Here in the Senate bill, we'll see what they do. And of course, you also know that moving past that, you're going to have serious changes to Medicaid itself and how the relationship works between the federal government and the states, where states are now going to get a certain pot of money that's not going to be tied to increasing medical costs. And so you're going to have a situation where states are going to get less and less money every single year in relation with how healthcare costs grow, which means states are going to have an option to either make up the difference somewhere else within their own budgets, or simply toss more people out of the program.
Interesting. We're talking with Igor Volsky, the Vice President of the Center for American Progress. ThinkProgress.org. You all are super familiar with that. I use it. I talk about it almost every day. And Deputy Director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund. You can tweet them at CAP Action, by the way.
Yes, please do.
CAP, C-A-P, Action. Igor, this is interesting. These 14 senators representing states that expanded Medicaid, or in the case of like Lisa, or what's her name, not Susan Collins, the other senator from Maine, who's still a senator.
Angus King.
Oh no, it was Susan
Collins.
Yeah, Susan Collins. Okay, Who was the female senator from Maine who retired?
Olympia Snowe.
Olympia Snowe.
Yes.
That's what I'm sorry.
Olympia Snowe.
Yeah, but she's no longer there. In any case, in the case of Susan Collins,
very hard in 2009, 2010 to get her on the original.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
Anyhow, so Collins is concerned about, as is Murkowski, about the wiping out the whole services for women through Planned Parenthood.
Yes.
So
for 1 year, this will take away all Medicaid funding for Planned Parenthood. 2.4 million people depend on Planned Parenthood.
Right, no longer having access. But there are, I'm not sure if it was on MSNBC or on Fox, because I've got the two of them in the studio here this morning, and we kind of bounce back and forth while we're doing show prep. But one of them did an interview with a congressman. It wasn't a senator, but a congressman from Florida, and said, well, what about, you've got all these elderly people in Florida who are in nursing homes on Medicaid, how can you do this to them? And he said, we never expanded Medicaid in Florida, so this isn't going to affect us. This isn't going to affect most red states. That's essentially why most Republicans are just fine with this, because we're only penalizing those Republican governors who were stupid enough to expand Medicaid to go along with Obamacare in the first place. Is there an element of, is that true?
Hold up, did they tell him that Rick Scott did expand Medicaid? He did it on a test, he received a special waiver from the Obama administration that allowed him to expand Medicaid for a period of time in a certain way. He did it through private insurers, through managed care, but he did expand Medicaid. Did he say he didn't? That's curious.
This was the congressman.
Curious congressman, curious.
He said we never expanded it.
Well, look, this, you hear a lot from the president, from Republicans, pushing this line of Obamacare is failing or Obamacare is in a real death spiral. The fact of the matter is the governors and the lawmakers who implemented Obamacare as it should be implemented, who laid out all the regulations and kept insurers accountable when they tried to increase premiums, who expanded Medicaid and allowed people to come into the program for the very first time. In those states, Obamacare has been incredibly successful. I'm talking about places like California, for instance. But yes, in states where the local politicians fought it tooth and nail, did nothing when insurers increased premiums, did not expand Medicaid, yeah, they're struggling.
Right, because those states still have 17, 18, 19% unemployed, or excuse me, uninsured rates.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's remarkable. So get over to TrumpCareToolkit.org. You were telling me about an airport.
Oh, yeah. So, we started seeing after the Senate bill dropped yesterday, all of these rumors of people going to the airport, to the Reagan National Airport, not far from here, to basically tell these senators, you can't just drop a bill and then fly away, which is what, of course, they did. Many of them went home. They go home usually Thursday afternoons. And so we saw these rumors. We went down there and were greeted by folks who had signs. About 60, 70 folks were there chanting, hoping to see senators, saying, don't fly away and take my health care away, basically.
Oh, was this just a spontaneous thing?
Yeah, completely spontaneous, organic thing. And I was walking around and saw Senator Grassley just sitting there reading his phone. And so I went up to him and I said, hey, Senator, my name's Igor Volsky. It's great to meet you. And we shake hands and I say, I'd love to talk to you about healthcare. And he immediately gets up and gets his bag. And I'm I'm just wondering if you've had a chance to read the Senate bill. And he says, it's very long. It's very long. I haven't read it.
And some odd pages, right?
142.
142.
Haven't had a chance to read it. And I'm well, how long do you think it's going to take you? And he said, I don't know. I'm a very slow reader. And then we asked him, that's what he told me. We asked him, so do you support people losing coverage? And he literally just makes a beeline for security to get past the security gate where, people with tickets can't go.
Right.
And just literally kind of ran away from us as we were trying to ask him those questions.
Wow.
But it's indicative, it's indicative of the fact, you were saying this earlier to me, that Republicans aren't excited to talk about this bill. They don't want to discuss the guts of it because it's the least popular piece of legislation in history. I think the latest number was 16% or something that came out today from one of the least popular presidents in history, who's of course under FBI investigation. So they have a lot to think about.
So you're working with, one of the premier progressive think tanks and groups here in the country, actually.
Yeah,
you're here in Washington, D.C., but, I've been a long admirer. And how do you see this playing out? Game this out. Where do you think this is going to go?
Well,
what do you think the probabilities of?
I honestly think, and I'm not spinning you guys here, I think it all depends on what we do between now and next Thursday. If we take these next 2 days, this weekend, to show up at our state capitals, at district offices, and kind of raise hell about what's going on and what's in this bill. And then when Monday comes around, if we get on TrumpCareToolkit.org and call these senators nonstop, we can stop this bill. There's no question in my mind. Senators respond to this kind of energy. We saw it the first time, March 20th, when the House pulled back that healthcare bill, and you had members of Congress saying, I've heard your calls. I'm not going to support this thing. I'm so sorry. We can do the same thing here. It depends on how much energy we can put together. It literally is in our hands. The lives of millions of people are literally in our hands. We can organize. We can make this go away because there's no great interest there's no great grassroots energy on their side for this thing. We have the energy. We just
They've
have
got
to
the
harness
billionaire
it.
interest. I mean, you've
They
got,
have the well. That's what this bill is ultimately. Of course,
Yeah,
you take
it's a
healthcare
$600
away
billion
from the
tax cut.
poor. Yeah, exactly, and you give tax cuts to the very wealthy. Yeah.
So yeah, all right. So get out there, get active, tag, you're it, right? Any last points you'd like to make, Igor, before we wrap this up?
I mean, I would just say TrumpCareToolkit.org. And if you don't live in these 14 states, go on Facebook and find your friends in West Virginia, in Alaska, in Maine, and ask them to take action. Activate your friends. This
And
is
you
the
can,
time.
and since it's a URL, it's a simple website, TrumpCareToolkit.org. You can tweet it, you can Facebook it, you
Do it
can
all.
Do it. Yeah, great. Igor Volsky,
Thank you
thanks
so much,
for
Tom.
being with us.
My pleasure.
Great to
Thanks.
have you in the studio. And Center for American Progress, thinkprogress.org also is a great website, great resource. And you can tweet at them at CAP Action. It's a community, CA, Center for American Progress.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
That's TrumpCareToolkit.org. Tweet at CAP Action. We'll be right back. Thank you.